Hello again. We're continuing our stories from the Lakota way. This story shows about compassion, just to care, to sympathize, is the story of the eagle. Some of our elders like to tell of how our people came up out of a hole in the earth in the southern edge of the Black Hills. That's a creation story. This one I'm about to tell you is a recreation story. And it wouldn't have a good, happy ending if there was no compassion in the world. Long ago, the people were living in a land of many lakes. In the forest, there were many animals, such as deer, elk, and moose, to hunt for food and clothing. The lakes were filled with fish of all kinds, and ducks and geese as well. The people were strong, their enemies were afraid of them, so there was peace. Life was very good. Then came a particularly hard winter. The snow was deep. It came early and stayed long. All the snow finally melted in May, the moon of berries ripening. Summer brought much rain, and the lakes and rivers began to fill. The rains kept falling. The people knew that the wet season always passed. They patched their round bark and thatched lodges to keep the water from leaking in and waited for the rains to let up. But they didn't. The lakes and the rivers filled more and more until they all overflowed their banks, yet the rains kept falling, the skies stayed dark and cloudy. The water rose higher and higher, chasing the people out of their lodges. They found higher ground and made new lodges, but the water kept coming. Soon there was no rest from the great flood. The people had to keep moving to the high hills and ridges. Even the animals fled from the waters. Food became scarce because the hunters couldn't hunt. Many belongings were lost to the rising waters. Because there was no dry wood for fires, the people were cold. The first among them to die were the old ones, who were too weak to fight the cold and hunger. Soon many people became ill with the coughing sickness. Some grew weak and died because there was no medicine to help them. Then the winds came. Out of the north came the winds, angry and vengeful. They whipped the floods into mean-spirited, dark being that sought out the people as they tried to flee, dragging them down into its cold darkness. Within days, all but one of the people were dead. A young woman clung to the rocks of a high hill. She had started climbing with her family, but the wind-driven flood had taken them all. Now she was alone. Hungry and cold and dizzy with grief, huddling in the rocks, waiting to die. Weakened by hunger and sadness, she fell asleep and slept for several days. The winds that had turned the flood into a frenzy also chased away the rain clouds. For the first time in nearly a month, the sun bathed the land with its healing, soothing warmth. The great winds went away, and in their place came gentle breezes that caressed the land with their softer breath. The great flood was over, but it left death in its passing. Broken and uprooted trees, torn hillsides, and flattened grasses and shrubs were its trail. From the high hill the young woman could see what the flood had done. She would never forget that it had taken her mother and father and her brother and sister. It was no matter to her that the sun was shining and the animals were beginning to return. She was alone. Her plaintive wail of grief rose over the land, causing four-leggeds and wingeds to pause and listen. The young woman did not leave the hill. Day after day, night after night, she sat overcome with grief, despair, and loneliness, growing weaker and weaker from lack of food and water. One afternoon she awoke to find a great eagle perched on a nearby rock. He was very large and dark brown, almost black feathers. She was frightened because she knew the eagle to be a great hunter, with powerful talons that could rip her flesh, and she had no way to defend herself. The young woman was drawn to the eagle's soft brown eyes. He looked at her with curiosity. She waited, suddenly sensing that there was no danger. Then the eagle spoke. "I have seen that you are alone," he said. She began to sob quietly, then stopped. "Yes," she replied. "The flood took my family. It took all my people, the two-leggeds. I am alone." "You are sad. I heard you weeping." "My family is gone. My people are gone. There is only me, and all I have is sadness. It stays with me day and night." "Then I will be your friend," said the eagle. "Tell me what I can do for you." "You can do nothing," she lamented. "I am alone. I will die alone." "That is not true," he replied. "Look around. Your relatives, the four-leggeds, the wingeds like me, the crawlers. They are here. We are all here." "But my people are gone. I am the last," she sobbed. "There is no one like me left. So I am waiting to die to rejoin my people." "If you die, there will be no more like you on the earth. There will be nothing but emptiness where your kind once lived. That cannot be. You must live." He stretched his wings and rose in the air. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Are you leaving me?" "Only to bring you food," he told her. "I will return." And he did, bringing a large fish. "I must make a fire to cook this," she said. "I cannot eat this without cooking it." "What do you need for fire?" he asked. "Wood," she said, "dry wood." The eagle, of course, could fly very fast, and after several flights to the forest he had collected a large pile of wood for her. The young woman first built a fire starter of wood and cord, then started a fire and cooked the fish. Even a small bite seemed to give her strength. She could feel it flowing through her. All the while the eagle had been sitting back, for he was afraid of the fire. "You two-leggeds can do a very powerful thing," he said. "You can make fire, but of course we wingeds and four-leggeds do not need such a thing." "Yes, fire cooks our food so we can eat it. It keeps us warm. There is nothing like a warm fire to chase away the darkness. A good fire is like a good friend." The eagle brought more wood so she could have fire through the night and stay warm. In the morning, when she awoke, he was gone, but her fire was still smoldering. She built up her fire and wondered where he was. For a time he had eased her loneliness, and she was grateful. As the morning wore on and he did not return, she thought he had only been a dream. Yet there was the fire and the dried-out skin of the fish. He returned in the middle of the day, this time with a rabbit. "This is a fine day," he said. "It is good to be alive." The young woman was glad of the eagle's return. She skinned the rabbit, cooked it, and ate as he watched with great interest. "There is a fine valley toward where the sun goes down, a good place to build a lodge. There is water, and it is sheltered from the cold winter wind. Perhaps you should go there," he said. "No," she replied. "I am here, and I will stay here. I can build a lodge here, if that is what I want to do." The eagle could see that her sadness was great. He knew also that she would always be sad because she was the last of her kind. He had flown far over the lakes and valleys, but he had found no other two-leggeds. She would grow old and die alone. He continued to bring her food and firewood day after day, and he would circle over her hill watching for any danger. Once he chased a bear away from the hill, swooping down again and again. She grew stronger with each passing day and began to worry about her appearance. She brushed off her dress and made a comb to do her hair. Before the flood she had been the loveliest young woman in many villages, and young men had come from near and far to court her. Now, of course, she was the most beautiful woman anywhere. One day, while waiting for the eagle, she climbed to the very top of her hill. From there she saw across a wide valley and many lakes. There was beauty all around. In time, the scars from the great flood would be no more. But what she could do alone, she wondered. Like any young woman, she had dreamed of marrying a fine, handsome young man and having children. They would live not far from her mother and father's lodge in their village by the lake. He would hunt, and she would keep their lodge, and they would grow old together. Now she was standing on a hill, a cold, terrible truth within her. She was the last of her kind. What was she to do? One of the tiny black specks in the sky above began to grow larger and larger, and soon she heard the rush of wind under great wings of the eagle. He landed. She marveled at the speed of his mighty wings and the power in them. But he also had a different power, the power to chase away her loneliness. "What am I to do?" she asked. "Without you I would have nothing. If only I was an eagle, I would fly with you. I could see what you see from so high in the sky, and I would not be the only of my kind." "Come," he said, "we shall fly. Grab my legs as I rise into the air." She did, and they rose from the hill. She was afraid at first, and she hung on very tight. But as they soared upward, she saw the earth as she had never seen it before, and she trembled in awe. She felt powerful as everything on earth grew smaller. It was a sight she could never have imagined. Though the things on the earth, trees, hills, lakes, and rivers, grew smaller as they went higher, the earth itself grew larger, and the young woman was humbled by the wondrous sight of it. They flew until her arms became tired, but she was reluctant to return to the hill. "Thank you," she said. "I envy what you are." "I am your friend," he replied, "and always will be." Their friendship became stronger. He brought her food, and she scratched pictures of him on the rocks. Every day she ventured farther and farther from her camp, and was soon talking of building a lodge somewhere, perhaps on the very top of the hill. The eagle saw that the young woman was smiling more often. Still he could see sadness in her eyes. On one fine day in late summer the eagle soared on the winds high above the young woman's hill. Autumn was on the way, and winter would not be far behind. Already some cold breezes were coming from the north. The young woman needed to prepare for winter, or she would perish. He was troubled. "Grandfather," he called out, "you who are most powerful, why have you not seen to her well-being?" he asked. "I have done so," came back a voice. "I have sent you to her." "I have helped her because she is needful and a fine being," replied the eagle. "I can only bring her food. I cannot give her what she truly needs. She needs others of her kind." "There is a way," the voice replied. "Tell me, grandfather," the eagle said. "I will help her in any way I can." "You are a fine being, too. You have a kind heart and are deserving of your place in the great circle of life," said the voice. "Few have your power. It would be difficult to lose your place, for that is what must happen if you truly want to help the two-legged." "I do not understand, grandfather." "To help her you must become a two-legged. If you do, you will never ride the winds again. You will never again see the earth from above the highest mountains. The choice is yours. You can become a two-legged, and as a male and female you can together give the earth more of her kind, or you can remain as you are." The eagle was very quiet that night as he sat with the young woman. He was troubled. She saw that his brown eyes had lost their usual sparkle. "Is there something on your mind?" she said. "Yes," he replied. "I must go away. There is much I have to think about." "You will return?" she asked. "I could not bear it if you were lost to me." "I will return," he promised. "No matter what happens, I will always be your friend. I will bring you food before I leave. Stay on the hill. Do not wander far," he cautioned. The next day the young woman climbed to the top of the hill and watched the sky. There were many hawks circling and a few eagles. She wondered which one of those high black specks was her friend. The next day was the same, and the day after that. She was impatient for his return because loneliness stalked her like an enemy in the night. The eagle soared higher than he had ever flown, and saw more of the earth than he had ever seen. It was a sight he never wanted to forget. "Grandfather," he called out, "I am here." "Grandson," the voice replied, "I know what is in your heart. You have been troubled for these many days, yet you have made a choice." "Yes," said the eagle, "I know what I must do." The choice you make is a road you can never turn back from, said the voice. There are still many of my kind, said the eagle. She is only one, and she cannot be the last of her kind. The earth and everything on it would feel the loss. I can see no other way. So be it, said the voice. I tell you this, two-leggeds will find a place in their hearts for your kind. He will hold you high. The summer was ending. The young woman knew. The cold breezes came down from the north. She walked the hillside to gather wood for her fire. Now and then she looked up at the sky, but as yet he had not returned. Do you wait for someone? Came a voice from behind her. It was a familiar voice, one she knew very well. He had returned. The young woman turned with a smile which became a frown. She could see no one. I am here, said the familiar voice. The young woman nearly fainted as a tall, handsome young man stepped from behind the rock. How can this be? She cried. I thought all of us were taken by the flood except for me. That is true, said the young man. Then where do you come from? From the sky, the young man replied. The young woman was shocked into silence and disbelief. Yet the voice of the young man was familiar. It was the voice of the eagle. Pushing aside her confusion and fear, she stepped closer. There was something familiar in those deep brown eyes also. Remember the day we flew together, he asked. I took you up far above the earth. It cannot be, she cried. It is you. I promised I would return, and so I have. Are you not happy to see me? The young woman ran and fell into his embrace, feeling something she thought could never be. Yet she felt something else as well. Each time she came near to him thereafter, she felt as though she were soaring. Before that winter they built a lodge at the edge of a forest, and in time became mother and father to many children, and to a new race of two-leggeds. She told her children who their father was, and what he had been. They would watch the sky as the great eagles flew. They were, of course, watching their relatives. They taught their children who taught their children, and so on, to do the same. Perhaps now you understand why eagle feathers are sacred to us. To this day we Lakota revere the great eagles, and each time we see one in the sky we pause to speak our thanks to those relatives for their compassion. Thank you.